The Young and the Restless spoilers shock, Monday full episodes June 30th, 2025. The golden light of the French Riviera may have bathed the estate in warmth and serenity, but beneath its surface, a quiet dread pulsed like a second heartbeat. The air was too still, the laughter too forced, the smiles just a little too wide. What had been pitched as a luxurious retreat, a gathering of elite friends, old and new, surrounded by vineyards and sea, was beginning to reveal itself as something far more calculated. And as the hours stretched into days, and the gates remained locked under the pretense of external unrest, the guests began to exchange nervous glances and hushed theories. Among them were Victor and Nikki, whose instincts were rarely wrong, and who now found themselves at the mercy of a host whose true intentions were cloaked in charm and manipulation. Victor had felt it almost immediately. The lack of communication with the outside world. The vague explanations from staff. The polite but firm refusal to accommodate early departures. And then there was Cain, grinning, gracious, seemingly in control of every moment, but always watching. It wasn't a vacation. It was a containment. Victor said as much to Nikki, who nodded gravely. "This isn't hospitality," she whispered to him over a half-finished glass of wine. "It's a performance." They approached Nick and Sharon under the guise of casual conversation, but their voices grew tense quickly. Nikki said what they all were thinking. It wouldn't surprise her one bit if this had been Cain's plan all along. Nick was furious. He had already been skeptical of Cain's sudden reappearance in Genoa City, and now, after the bloodshed in Paris and the bizarrely curated guest list for this so-called retreat, his suspicions had evolved into something more primal, defensive, protective. Especially when it came to Sharon. She had insisted on coming, believing there might be something redeemable left in Cain, some twisted reason behind his descent. But now even she couldn't ignore the unsettling vibes surrounding the estate. And yet, oddly enough, it was Phyllis who seemed least concerned. In fact, Sharon had been the first to notice how relaxed Phyllis had become. How she sipped her wine with ease, how her voice was light and casual, how she laughed more easily than she had in weeks. It was enough to spark concern, especially when Phyllis started defending Cain's behavior. "We're in the French Riviera," she said with a smirk, "and Cain has been a perfect host." "What's with the paranoia?" Sharon narrowed her eyes. It wasn't just the words, it was the way Phyllis said them. Her tone was too dismissive, too rehearsed. They had been rebuilding their fractured friendship, slowly learning to trust one another, but now Sharon couldn't shake the feeling that Phyllis was either being manipulated or actively playing a role in something deeper. She asked gently why Phyllis was in such a good mood, and Phyllis laughed it off with a shrug, pointing to the setting, the luxury, the escape from real life. But it was Nick who cut to the heart of it. "You had a meeting with Cain, didn't you?" Phyllis paused just a moment too long before admitting, yes, they had spoken, and yes, it had been productive. That word clanged in Nick's mind like a warning bell. Whatever was happening behind the scenes, Phyllis wasn't just a guest anymore. She was in play. Victor had heard enough. He leaned forward and told Phyllis bluntly that whatever deal she thought she was making, whatever promises Cain had dangled, it was all a lie. "He's buying your loyalty," he said, "and when he no longer needs it, he'll throw you to the wolves." But Phyllis, ever defiant, just smiled and said that maybe she was tired of picking the losing side. Sharon watched her walk away and felt a chill crawl down her spine. Something had shifted in Phyllis, and it wasn't just opportunism. It was alignment. And Cain, if he was behind this all, had her right where he wanted her. Meanwhile, the conversation turned to Lily. Nikki, still unsettled by the intensity of Cain's fixation, raised the question none of them had dared say aloud: what if Lily was involved? Sharon immediately rejected the idea, but then hesitated. "Her body language," she said softly, "she's tense. Like she's screaming on the inside. I think he's trying to use her. I think he might be trying to seduce her again, not with love, but with fear. With pressure." Nikki nodded grimly. "Or worse," she replied. He might be trying to make her complicit. Use her image, her loyalty, to make this whole setup seem legitimate. And if that was true, then every smile Lily offered was a silent cry for help, and every appearance she made alongside Cain was part of a larger deception. Victor stood, unable to sit still any longer. He needed answers. He needed to confront Cain directly. But when he tried to request a meeting, he was told Cain was unavailable. For 3 hours. Then 6. By evening, he had still not emerged. The guests, already growing restless, began to murmur in corridors and corners. Phones still had no service. The estate's Wi-Fi had been disabled due to security protocols. The gates remained locked, and any inquiry was met with vague reassurances. It was then that Devon arrived, not through the front entrance, but through the back, flanked by a private security detail he had hired himself. He had traced the encrypted communications from Paris back to this very estate. He had followed Holden Novak's movements. And now, standing face to face with Sharon, Nick, and the Newmans, he confirmed their worst fears. "This isn't a retreat," he said. "It's a trap." They asked what he meant. Devon explained the pattern, how everyone Cain had invited was either an asset, a threat, or a distraction. Sharon's connection to public sentiment. Phyllis's legal leverage. Victor's financial history with rival entities. Nikki's political influence. Nick's proximity to media control. Every guest had a purpose. And every purpose served one man, the real Dumas. Because Cain, as Devon now believed, had never stopped working for him. Or possibly was still just a puppet. Holden Novak, the man Devon had been tailing, had arrived at the estate 2 days earlier under the guise of logistics support. But Devon knew who he really was as a courier. A strategist. Possibly even the next mask Dumas would wear. And if the guests didn't get out soon, they would all be entangled in whatever came next. Victor's face darkened. "Then we stop it," he said. "We shut it down." But Devon shook his head. "We're already in the middle of it. And I think Cain wanted us exactly where we are." Somewhere within the estate, operations were already unfolding. Servers being copied. Conversations being recorded. Agreements signed under duress. Cain, or the man claiming to be him, was weaponizing every secret, every alliance, every moment of hesitation. The only way to fight back was to expose him. But they would need proof. And to get that, someone would have to risk going deeper. Phyllis, watching from a window above, smiled faintly as she sipped from her wine glass. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't stupid. She knew Cain was dangerous. But for the first time in years, someone had made her feel valuable again. Necessary. Central. And whether he was telling the truth or not, Cain had promised her something no one else had: control. Now it was just a matter of how far she was willing to go to keep it. And down below, as the moon rose over the silent estate, the guests prepared for a battle they hadn't chosen. Because the French Riviera wasn't paradise anymore. It was a chessboard. And Cain, or whoever was playing him, was already several moves ahead. As the heavy doors closed behind Nikki and Victor, their tension still lingering like perfume in the air, Nick turned to Sharon and Phyllis with a sigh that carried the weight of too many unanswered questions. He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting toward the hallway Cain had vanished down hours ago. "I'm going to talk to him," he muttered, as if the idea had only just become inevitable. Sharon raised a skeptical eyebrow, while Phyllis tilted her head in faint amusement. But before Nick could leave, he paused, pointing a finger between them. "Promise me you two won't kill each other while I'm gone." The attempt at levity did little to ease the tension. Sharon crossed her arms, and Phyllis just scoffed, both of them clearly aware that their proximity over the last several hours had tested every boundary of civility. When Nick disappeared down the hall, Sharon glanced sideways at Phyllis, her expression tight. So, what should we talk about? She asked, half sarcastic. Phyllis didn't answer. She simply stared ahead, her fingers tapping nervously against her wine glass. The silence stretched until Sharon broke it again, her voice sharper this time. You really don't think trusting Cain is the single dumbest idea you've ever had? That landed. Phyllis turned her head, frowning. Excuse me? Sharon leaned in, her voice low but urgent. You don't find it suspicious that the man responsible for half the trauma in this room just happens to be our gracious host now? The one who threw a bloodbath in Paris and then invites us all here like nothing happened? There's something wrong about all of this. Phyllis opened her mouth to retort, but nothing came out immediately. Her eyes fell to her lap, where she twisted a cocktail napkin between her fingers. You know what I'm scared of, she said finally. That I won't ever get another job again. That this madness is the last door left open to me. Maybe I'm clinging to a maniac because he's the only one offering me anything. Sharon's face softened just a little, but before she could respond, Phyllis gave her a sideways glance, something curious glinting behind her usual fire. And you, she added, you're protecting me. Like a friend. She laughed dryly, shaking her head. Oh my God. Thank you. The sarcasm softened, but the vulnerability lingered in the air, fragile and real. Outside by the pool, the late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the stone patio, glittering in the calm water. Lily sat on the edge, her legs dangling in the pool, while Damian stood beside her, their conversation light and flirtatious. She laughed easily at something he said, her fingers brushing his arm. For a moment, it almost felt like a slice of peace. But the illusion shattered the moment Cain stepped onto the patio, his presence shifting the entire atmosphere like a cold gust of wind. His voice cut through the air, laced with venomous amusement. Who would have thought? I hire a man to run logistics, and he turns out to be Nate Hastings' half-brother, and my ex-wife's friend. Lily's smile vanished. She turned slowly, blinking up at Cain. And how do you know we're just friends, she asked, her voice calm but cautious. Cain took a few steps closer, his hands in his pockets, eyes locked on Damian with the kind of intensity that made the younger man shift uncomfortably. I don't, Cain said flatly. Are you? Lily stood, her wet feet making faint prints on the stone as she faced him. That's none of your business. Damian looked between them, reading the signs, and without protest, he gave Lily a reassuring nod before excusing himself. Cain watched him go, his jaw tight, then turned his full attention back to Lily. I didn't ask for anything, he said, his voice quieter now, laced with something softer, almost pleading. Not today. Not forgiveness. Not love. I just wanted to talk. Lily's eyes flared. And what? You expect me to pretend any of this is normal, she shot back. You think you can just lure people to some secluded estate, lock them in, manipulate the narrative, and then play the victim when people start asking questions? Cain flinched but didn't respond. She took a step closer. Whatever fantasy you're living in, it ends now. Whatever you thought we had, it's over. And it's never coming back. Her voice dropped, filled with a finality that cut through him. That will never happen, Cain. Not ever. For a moment, he said nothing. His face blank, expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he turned away, walking toward the railing overlooking the vast estate. You used to believe in me, he murmured. You were the only one who ever did. Lily stood frozen, torn between pity and fear, between the man she once loved and the stranger now hiding behind his eyes. I believed in who you were, she said finally. Not who you've become. The tension between them hung in the air long after she left, her footsteps echoing down the stone corridor as Cain remained at the balcony, eyes fixed on the horizon. And as the sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows over the estate, it became clear that beneath the surface of every conversation, every glance, every calculated smile in that place, something was boiling. A reckoning was coming. And Cain, whether he realized it or not, had already lit the match. The heat between Cain and Lily had simmered for weeks beneath the glossy surface of their forced proximity, but now it flared into something raw and volatile. The poolside confrontation had left scars neither of them were prepared to acknowledge, and yet here they were again, locked in a private corner of the estate beneath the hush of evening light. Cain's expression was taut with frustration and desperation as he watched the woman he once called his own stand inches from a man he had never trusted. It was no longer about jealousy, it was about survival. And Cain, cornered by his own unraveling past, lashed out not with rage but with the bitter clarity of someone who had lost control. "Don't trust him," he said, voice low, eyes blazing. "Damian is using you now, and I guarantee you, he'll hurt you later." Lily stiffened. "You hired him, Cain," she replied, her words clipped and cold. "You didn't even meet him before he arrived." Cain's jaw clenched, and he stepped forward, each word more charged than the last. "You want to know why I fired him? Because he offered to spy on you for me. Said he could be my eyes and ears inside your life. Even suggested playing both sides with the Winters group. A double agent, Lily. That's the man you're kissing." His voice cracked at the end, not from anger, but from betrayal, from grief, from the recognition that he was no longer the man she believed in. But Lily didn't flinch. If anything, she stood taller, her voice sharper. "None of that matters, Cain. You say all these things to make me afraid. To make me doubt. But the truth is, I don't care what he offered. Because you're the one I can't trust. Not anymore." Cain's eyes searched her face, looking for anything left of the love they once shared, anything that would give him even the smallest hope of reconciliation. "I just want to come home," he whispered. "To you. To the life we had." But Lily's face hardened. "You're not the man I used to know," she said through clenched teeth. "And you're definitely not the man I used to love." Her voice rose with finality, the words slicing through the tension like a blade. "It's over." Cain staggered back slightly, the breath knocked from him not by her volume, but by the irrevocability of her conviction. And just as he began to process what had happened, Damian returned, casual, confident, unaware of the dagger Cain had just taken to the heart. Lily turned to Damian with fire still in her veins and pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his lips with the kind of passion that came not from impulse but from choice. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a declaration, a line drawn, a battle cry wrapped in affection. And Cain watched, helpless, as the woman he had built his life around offered her heart to someone else, someone he had tried to warn her about. With a look of stunned disbelief, Cain turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the darkness of the estate like a ghost fading into shadows. Damian pulled back slightly, surprised but smiling. "Wow," he said, blinking. "That was incredible. But I'm guessing part of that was for Cain's benefit?" Lily looked at him seriously. "Maybe a little," she admitted, "but I've wanted to kiss you since the day I met you." Damian's smile deepened. "I like that it's something you wanted to do, not something you needed to do." Lily nodded. "It was both. And for that, I have no regrets." For a moment, they were still, savoring the quiet honesty between them, even as the world around them teetered on the edge of chaos. Elsewhere on the estate, Nick had finally tracked Cain down, finding him near the gardens that overlooked the Mediterranean. The wind rustled the olive trees, but there was no peace in the air. Nick didn't waste time. "Why all the secrecy?" he demanded. "Why hide your identity? Why bring everyone here under false pretenses?" Cain turned slowly, his face a study in exhaustion and defiance. "Sometimes, Nick," he said evenly, "things really are as simple as they seem." But Nick's eyes narrowed, his voice a low warning. Nothing about this is simple. People are scared. They're trapped here without answers. And you're out here dodging every question. That's not leadership. That's manipulation. Cain looked down at the earth beneath his feet. He didn't answer, not right away. Because the truth was, he no longer knew which part of his story was real and which had been created for him by forces he couldn't even name. His identity, his mission, his intentions? They had all blurred in the service of something larger, something dangerous, and maybe even something he no longer controlled. He had worn too many masks, played too many roles, and now, standing in the crosshairs of his past and present, he couldn't remember what face was truly his own. Nick waited for a reply, but none came. And in that silence, a deeper truth settled between them. The man standing before him wasn't just hiding something. He was hiding from something. Maybe himself. Maybe a truth so catastrophic that if spoken aloud, it would burn everything down. Either way, Nick knew one thing for certain: Cain's story wasn't over. And whatever came next, it would either save them all or destroy everything.